Begin the current Daf, Mesech Kesuvos Daf. Begin 11 lines down from the top of the Amud. The Gemara continues to explain the halacha of a previous Mishnah, which we spoke about the different obligations that a husband has to a wife. One of them was the obligation for kavura, for burial. And that Rabbi Yehuda said that even the poorest man of the Jewish people has an obligation for a minimum what he has to do by the Levaya. And the Gemara gets into the discussion regarding that machlekes, why the Tanna Kama would seemingly not hold like that when it would seem to be an obligation. She corresponds to Kazakh and Cheskel, Tanya from Daf Chaim. Appreciate was joining me for today's Daf. Sometimes discussing today's Daf are, like we mentioned, the machlekes regarding obligations of an ani, a poor man for his wife's funeral. And we continue with the halacha of the next Mishnah, the case of Masra Av L'Shluchei Abal, when the father gives over his daughter to the agents of the husband who's getting married to his daughter, regarding that nichnas of the Shus Abal, that's considered like a form of chuppah, of entering the husband's domain, but there's a machlekes exactly regarding to what extent. And regarding a case in which Mosav l'shluch habal is not considered chuppah, and that's again regarding opinions regarding the extent of this form of chuppah, how much do we say to act like a chuppah of Yisur. The concept of oili moy ve'eni yiredzis moy, which regarding that the wife, when she comes into her husband's domain, she only gets elevated to his status, but does not get downgraded to his status. Kedushin, she's considered Eshes Abal regarding Znus when she gets engaged. The Suin is the second stage. She's considered Eshes Abal for all matters, which includes, and we'll see that regarding Nichnas L'Shus Abal, of Masar of L'Shluch Abal, if it's for all these things or some of them. But when there's actual marriage, you have, she could eat Truma, he's a Kohen, he inherits her, he could be Metamet to her, he could nullify her vows. If she finds something or she has earnings, it goes to him. When she gets married to another person after that, then her ksubah is automatically a mana, 100, not 200. Now, midday re'aisa biblically, an arusa could be a chelas b'truma. A woman who's engaged, once she's this kedushin, she could already eat truma. She's already kini kasplay. She's already her husband's wife. Now, rabbinically, an arusa cannot eat truma until she actually comes to the chuppah. Now, the machlek is why that is, and that's alluded to in this sugya. Some say shemitashkala acher la'achaysa. What happens is the chassan is going to give her some truma to drink. She's still in her father's house, so then her brothers and sisters can say, "Oh, can we have from that truma, from that drink, from that thing?" And they're not able to have because they're not kahana. And others say, Mr. Simpman, what happened is that the although she halachically is married to him, but until they're actually intimate, he might find some type of flaw, some type of movement they're together, and he's going to say mekach tayis. And therefore, because of that, until they're actually married, she's not allowed to actually have that truth. So we begin the current Daf Memches. We begin by the two dots, the second one, where it's from the words of the Mishnah, 11 line down. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer, he says, we had in the previous Mishnah, one of the items we mentioned that a husband has an obligation for a wife was kfurasa, her burial. Now, the Tanna Kama does not say anything regarding what Rabbi Yehuda says. Yehuda says, even the poorest person, etc., he can't have less than 2 flutes and a lamenter. That's what they used to do by Levaya. So it says the Gemara, the inference is the Tanna Kama holds, Hani Loi, that these things you don't need to do for the wife. What's the case talking about? As the Gemara explains. Either Urcha, if it's the norm for the girls of her family, that they do this in their family when someone passes away, that they do these flutes and the mekaynos. So my Tanna Kama damaloi. What's the reason the Tanna Kama says that you don't have to do it? Why not? That's an obligation that you have for her to do burial, and that's what her custom is. Vidalav orcha, and if it's not her way, so my Tanna Yehuda, what's the reason Yehuda that you have to do this? Says the Gemara, lo tzricha. No, what necessary is kagun the urchi didei. We're talking about where that it's actually the family, the girls in his family have that done for them when they pass away. Which places make sound like that by the women would be different than the men. But the point is that you're right, in her family, they didn't do that. But in his family, they did do that. Now, but it's not the norm for her family. So this is the machlekes. When do we say this halachic dictum that the Gemara is going to bring later on the Samach Aleph? That when a woman gets married to a man, she only gets upgraded with him, but she does not get downgraded with him. Now we know from the words in the pasuk it's called Bu'ulas Baal. Bu'ulas Baal literally means to say that she had bia from a husband. But we learn out Bu'ula could be read Ba'aliyaseh Shal Baal. She only gets elevated with the husband and not B'liyaseh Shal Baal, as the Gemara says later on Daf Samach Aleph. Now, so when, says the Tanakhama, when do we say the concept that she gets upgraded to his status, not downgraded, is Hanamili B'chaim? That's only when she's alive. For example, let's say he tells her that he wants her to nurse the kids. She says, I don't want to nurse the kids. And the ways of the girls of her family, they used to nurse their kids. But his family was more royal or they had these, they would hire a wet nurse. So even though in her family they would nurse, she could say, but in your family they don't. And therefore I get upgraded to the status in your family. But that's a Tanakhama holds, that's only when she's alive. Aval achar misa, when she's already dead, then we don't say she gets upgraded to his status. Oh, so in her family, when the women pass away, they don't do the 2 flutes and the lamenter. Okay, so then she doesn't get upgraded to his status. And that's why the Tanakhama didn't say anything about Shnei Chalil Mekaynes, because you don't get upgraded after death. And therefore we treat her like her in her family, which they would not have the 2 flutes and the Mekaynes. Even after death, you say the same halachic principle of and since in his family they would have the 2 flutes and the mekaynes, so therefore you have to do it. That's the principle. That's the disagreement between Yehuda and the Tanakhama. He says halachic Yehuda looks like Yehuda that, like we said, that you upgrade to the husband's status even la'achar misa to obligate the shtei chalil and mekaynes. Another teaching from Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says Mishnah Nishtata, a related teaching. If someone became mentally deranged, a person, like they say, snap, someone just became deranged. So Bezdin Yerdin L'chasav, so the courts, they go down to his estate. They provide the sustenance and all the needs of the wife and their sons and the daughters. B'davar acher, and something else, which he was going to explain what that is, from this person who became mentally deranged. Now, the Gemara asks, Amli Rabbeinu Rabash, says, how is this different than we learned in the Brisa? Says, Misha halach, if someone went, the Medina Sayyam, went overseas, Vishtu Tavas Mezaynis, and the wife is petitioning for food. This guy left, he went on a big journey and she has nothing to eat. So Bezdin Yerdin L'Chasav, so the courts, they go down to his estate, Bizanin, and they provide food, Umefanisin, and they provide the clothing and the garments, as ishtay for his wife, aval loy banav v'naisam, but not for his sons and his daughters, because he's not obligated to feed them when they're alive, which, like we said, always interesting. Only when he's dead is there an actual obligation that's written in the Kesuvos. When he's alive, he doesn't have to feed his kids. So therefore, we don't feed his kids, and nothing else either. So the question is, what's the difference? What's the difference when he's out of sight or when he's out of mind? What's the difference either when? Why when the shtata do you say you go and you take to feed his kids, and here you're saying you don't, and also the davar achar, which we can explain exactly what that is, you do when he's in the shtata, but you don't do when he's overseas. So on that, Rav Ashi responded to Ravina, says, what do you mean? Which you could read that 2 ways, but you don't think there's a difference between someone who left consciously, so someone who left unconsciously, meaning when someone leaves intentionally with consciousness, he should have commanded regarding feeding his sons and his daughters and his wife. Now he didn't. So he obviously revealed his intention that he doesn't want to feed them. So therefore his wife that he's obligated because of stipulations of the Kesuvos, so his assets have a lien on it to support his wife. But his kids, he has no obligation, since he didn't say, you don't feed. But if he became mentally deranged, where he left the world without consciousness, without intent, we could presume that he probably wanted to feed his kids from his food, which Trace discusses, was he doing it up until now or not, but be that as it may, that's the difference between Yotzi Ladas and Yotzi Shaloi Ladas. Ladas, then he obviously doesn't want to. Shaloi Ladas, we could presume that he would want to, and therefore we have to. Now, my dava acher, what's this other thing that we said that when he leaves intentionally, you don't give it when he leaves Shaloi Ladas, let's say it becomes nishtata, then you have an obligation to take from his assets. So Rav Chizdam, he says that tachshit. This refers to the perfume that the women would put on, which that depends. If he's Yotzi Ladas, then you say that, okay, why didn't you say it? Obviously you don't want the wife to have it. Became mentally deranged, we can presume that he probably would want his wife to have it. Rabbi Yisrael, he said tzedakah. This refers to the ability for them to give the charity. So the Gemara says as follows: Man de matakshed, according to one that says that you don't give to the wife even her ornamental spices. You don't give her the perfume when he left intentionally. Oh, then Koshkin, the more so, we're not going to do that for tzedakah, to take charity from his properties. But mandam and tzedakah, the one that says that we don't take charity from his assets, but he would agree that you would still give, even though he left intentionally and he didn't say to give to his wife, you're going to give this perfume. Why? Because he doesn't want that his wife should be disgusted, and therefore, even though he didn't command when he left, we're going to do it just like we do for the food and for the clothing. Now, the Gemara continues related that Amar Rav Chia bar Ovid Amar Rav Huna says, if someone overseas, and his wife died, so he's not around. He's on a long trip, and his wife had a heart attack and passed away. So he bears in Yordan L'chasam. The courts, they go down to his estate, and they bury her according to his honor. So it's according to his honor, not according to her honor. Meaning, if you're telling me there's something that in her family that they do, but that's not in his family, you think you don't have to do it for her? As Rashi explained, most definitely she's not Yeredesima. Meaning, even according to one that we quoted earlier that says that you're not going to be Oile Imai La'achar Misa, but for sure you're not Yeredes. So why is it only Lefi Chavayda and not Lefi Chavayda and not Lefi Chavayda? You're going to downgrade her? No, so the more no aim, I say Af Lefi Chavayda. Meaning, of course Lefi Chavayda, but we're saying even according to his honor, meaning Hakamash Malan, what we're teaching is Oile Imai, and Yeredes Imai, she gets upgraded to his family, and she does not get downgraded. Vafilach means even like that mandam, like the opinion that we said before, which was Machlekes. But on Achar Misa, that even Achar Misa you're going to say Oile Imai and not Yeredes Imai. Now, Amar Mas, now related teaching that the Gemara finishes off this conversation. It says, if someone says when he's dying, he says, if his wife dies, don't bury his wife from his estate. So we listen to him. Why? So Rashi explains, because since he died when she's still alive, and she collects her kasuba, he doesn't have to bury her, because the Mishnah teaches later on of Tanihim and Beis that whoever inherits her kasuba is the one who's obligated in burying her. That's actually, we said in the Mishnah that that's one equivalent for the other. Here where he's dying, so he's not going to get her kasuba, so her Yersh not going to get it. So if he says don't bury her from my estate, we listen to him. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Maishna, why is it any different Ki Amar when he says this as he's passing away? Because why do you listen to him? The Nafli Nixi Kamiyasmi, because who is the estate falling in front of? It's falling in for the orphans. He's not getting the ksuba, so therefore he has an obligation to bury her. But it's going to be her inheritors that are going to get it. Then even if he doesn't say Nixi Kamiyasmi Dami, it's still going to be that her orphans are going to get the estate, and they're going to get the ksuba. Then obviously that her burial is not on them. So therefore, why do you have to say it only if he says it? Even if he doesn't say it, he's not getting the ksuba. I thought whoever Yershe ksuba, they're the ones that have a chiv to bury her. So why does he have to say this? What do you mean shaymanly? So the Gemara says, Eli, right, it's a very different version of this teaching. It was something different. However, if someone says, it makes who? Someone, it wasn't about his wife. You're right, his wife he doesn't have to bury because he's not getting the ksuba. Nothing to do with saying or not saying. Saying if he dies, and he says, he says, don't bury me from my estate. Ain Shemele was a teacher. We don't listen to him. Why? He has no right to make his sons wealthy and to throw himself onto the society, say, I have no money, bury me from the chesed shalemes, or this and that we don't have no right to do that. And therefore, if he has, they have an obligation to bury him from his estate. And that was the teaching. Then I'll look at the next Mishnah. Continue on this theme, the relationships for the woman between her father and her husband, which the previous Mishnah spoke about, the certain rights and obligations the father has, and then of the husband, and now from the transfer from the father to the husband. Says the Mishnah, the woman is always in the domain of the father, meaning if you have a Jewish girl that's engaged to a kohen, she does not eat truma, and the father has all the rights in his daughter, until, when does that change? Shetichana is that she goes into as a continuing basis. So the husband's domain for marriage. In other words, even though she already has kedushin and she's engaged, but she has to enter chuppah for the purposes of nasuin. That's considered being given over into the domain of the husband. Then she gets transferred in those rights and obligations. Now, says the Mishnah, Masar Avla Shluchei Abal. Let's say there was no chuppah, but the father gave her over to the agents of the husband, or taking her back home to Mamarush, or taking her back on the horse and buggy. Harei b'shus Abal. So then she's already in the domain of the husband. However, let's say the father didn't just send her, he got on the wagon with her also. He's coming along with the Shluchei Abal. Let's say the father's agents went with the husband's agent. Then actually, Harei b'shus Av, she still has not left the father's domain, so she's still in the father's domain. Now, Masru Shluchei Av Shluchei Abal, if the father's agent sent her over ready to the agents of the husband, which the father was sending her through his agents, and then his agents met the husband's agents, and they gave her over, Harei b'shus Abal, then she's already considered in the husband's domain. As long as there's no more of the father's presence, him or his agents, then it's already considered b'shus Abal. Now the Gemara says, we said a word, la'olam, it was a very interesting word. It said, la'olam me b'shus av. What's the word la'olam? It says, Gemara's lafukim and Mishnah and Yerushalayim. It's coming to exclude from the first version of the Mishnah in Parak Afapim, which, although we learned, Tosis says explicitly, the Mishnah tells us this, but that's the derech of the Tanaim, that they want to tell you something in the bridge, even though they can tell it to you later. To tell them, we learn the Mishnah on Daf Nun Zayin. The Mishnah tells us, Higia Zman. Let's say it reached the time of the 12 months for Besula, from when the husband says, okay, let's get married, or a widow for 30 days, where that's how much time you give the woman to prepare herself. So let's say the time already has allotted. V'loi nisu, and they didn't get married. For example, let's say the chassan was holding back the wedding, or something, einus of his own, something that's holding him back. So the halacha is oichlos mishaloi v'oichlos b'truma. So he has to already start feeding her, and she can already eat truma if she's a Jewish woman engaged to a kohen. That's what we're saying, kamash malon la'olam. Meaning, although the Mishnah Rishonim had said that even if a woman's engaged, she could eat truma, that once it's higiyazman, he has to feed her already. So we're saying that no, Mishnah Achrayna says, although originally the halacha was like that after 12 months, she's already going to start eating truma, then we said that no, la'olam, she's always going to be b'shus av, ad shemasar l'shluchei abal. Once, even if the time has come to get married, and they didn't get married yet, she's not going to have any truma. Now, we said in the Mishnah, masar av l'shluchei abal. Let's say the father gave her over to the agents of the husband, and then she's in the domain of the husband. Now, what's important to keep in mind, like we mentioned before, that the second stage of marriage is called nesua. So when Arusa, when they have chuppah, she becomes in nesua, she's married, and then she's in her husband's domain, and that she's considered eshes baal. Like we said, that includes many different things. She can eat truma, he inherits her, even though he's a kohen, he can be tamid to her, he can nullify her vows, she gets married to someone else, her ksuba is going to be 100 zuz, not 200 zuz. But now we have several opinions the Gemara is going to have regarding the case of masav l'shluchei abal, halei b'shus abal. So we're saying that that's like getting married, but to what extent is this like? It's not actual chuppah. It's a different procedure. It's just giving it over to the agents. So in what is that considered like chuppah, and that she's regarding b'shus abal, that's going to be many different opinions. So Amar Rav, he says, misidasa lakol. So this giving over to the agents of the husband is for everything. So he could inherit her. If he's a kohen, he can be tamid to her. He gets her earnings. For everything, she's considered like his wife when you give over the agents as in place of a chuppah. Chutz is one exception. Mitruma, the eating of truma. Now, Rashi explains the reason for that is because he holds, like the opinion that holds of simfai. The Gemara says later on, that you still have to be concerned that maybe the husband's going to find some blemishes, and going to come out that his kedushin and his marriage was a tais. It's like, I didn't know she had this big fat, blemish over here, and that's really bothering me, and they would never have gotten married based on that. So it would turn out that she was eating truma inappropriately because she wasn't really married. So therefore, although for everything it's considered like chuppah, but it's not like chuppah regarding to the eating of the truma. That she wouldn't be able to do even if with Masar Ha'ab or Shluchi Ab Shluchi Habal. But Rav Asi says no. He says after truma. Now Rashi explains that this is actually the other opinion that the Gemara has, why you don't have the mu'reses, the mukadeshes, eating truma until you have chuppah. He holds that the reason why the Rabbanan said that the Arusa does not eat truma is because what's going to happen is maybe the chassan is going to send her a great cup of grape juice in her father's household, and her brothers and says, oh, the chassan gave it to you, can we drink? Now, that's problematic because she is the wife of the chatan, of the kohen. Her brothers and sisters are not. But now that she's already was Masal Shluch Habal, she's on the Vugan already on the way, so her siblings are not next to her. We said the father's not even there. He already gave her over. Oh, that's going to be permitted. So you could have even for truma because you don't have the problem of shemetesh kalachas. So that would depend if it's also for truma or not. What is the principle why we said that you cannot do it until you get married? Is it because of sinful? That would still apply because they weren't intimate yet. He never even met her yet. He just met her through letters. And she's on the way with the wagon. You could still have sinful and the problem of the blemishes, but you won't have the problem of giving it to the siblings. Now, Esrei Rav Huna Ravasi. Rav Huna asked Ravasi, who he held that she could even eat truma at this point. Some say it was Chiyah Barav Ravasi from our Mishnah. The Mishnah said, La'olam hi b'shusav. The girl is always considered in the father's domain, which we explained. What does the word la'olam mean? It's because the eating of truma that we explained, because we wanted to tell you Lafuga the Mishnah Rishayna that we said that she can't even eat truma. So what's this la'olam till? Ashadikanis l'chuppah, until she enters into the chuppah. So you see that's when she actually comes to the Shus Habal, but not when you're giving her over to the agents. So that contradicts this teaching of Rav Asi, who said that even for truma. So Amlahu, our Mishnah had different words, said l'shus habal nisuin, as some Girsois edit that, but the Gemara is assuming that means to say for chuppah. So Amalahu Rav, so Rav said to his student and his son, who he had asked this question on to his disputant, he says, Lavla minlcha, didn't I tell you, leitezlu basa ibcha, that don't go after opposites? Meaning, don't say something in the Beis Medrash from a Mishnah that could be interpreted two opposite ways, that the one could answer you that's exactly what his opinion would be. Because he could answer to you, Misirasa, giving her over to the Shluchei Habal, Zuhi Kinisasa L'chuppah. That is actually is the same thing as the equivalent of going to the chuppah. That's what comes L'shus Habal and Nisuin. So don't ask on him and say, "Ooh, you see that you could only eat that the truma when it's l'shus habal nisuin." Yes, das hates l'shus habal nisuin. Das is the misaras labal. That is kedisas l'chuppah. And never don't ask him such a thing that he could say, "Das, this is what it means," and never wouldn't be difficult. The next opinion, Shmuel, he says this that it's effective the misira to the shluchei habal is liyudushasa, is to inherit her, meaning. If she dies on the road, the husband's going to inherit the nadin, because even though the Gemara says later on that if a woman that's engaged dies, he doesn't inherit her. Here, since she was given over to the shluchei habal, the father was already moichel from now because of the closeness of the marriage, because she had already gone out on the wagon already. And that's different than the regular arus that's still in the father's household. Now, Rashi explains, but for truma, for eating truma, for nullifying her vows, not with a partnership with the father, and to get her found objects, which those are only because of Eva, because of what do you do? I'm providing for you and you're not giving me any stuff. That there's no application for that yet. And for that, no, you're right, the Mesira would not be considered like a chuppah. Taisa says that for Hafaras Nadarim it's not true. Taisa says that would apply, and he's saying that Yerusha is only being picked as a Chiddush. He holds that it would also be for removing her from Skila for Chenek. So there's a discussion exactly to what extent. But Shmuel is saying it's not working for all these other things, it's going to work for inheriting her. Now Rish Lakish Amar, he says Liksubasa. This that it's effective giving her over to the shluch habal is for her kesuba, which the Gemara is going to explain right now exactly what does that mean. Subasa mai. What do you mean that that you gave her over to the shluch habal, for that she's considered like married, that's effective for the kesuba? What does that mean? Meaning the imesa. If you tell me it means that if she dies, yadisla, that the husband inherits the kesuba, the nadin that the father had given that's written in the kesuba, well, haim the shmul. That's exactly Shmuel's opinion we just quoted, that says that he yarshins her, which is the kesuba. Some Ravina says no. Lema means to say ksubasa me'acher, the next husband that she marries. If that's going to be a mana, so if let's say on the road she gets a get from her, or he has a heart attack, this husband, they hear on halfway through, and now she's an almana, so we're going to make her an almana from nisuin, which the chum were not masakin more than a mana, whoever subsequently marries her. Although technically she's a basula, she should get a ksuba of 200. We say that no, the moment that she had chuppah, and we're saying that masar av l'shluch habal is the same thing. Once you had this nichnas l'shus habal by the being masar l'shluch habal, that's already like she's a almana from nisuin. This is the chuppah. That's what I'm saying. That's
like Rav.
What?
That he's saying the same thing like Rav.
Why like Rav? No, Rav's saying that it's for all these things. Meaning, with the question is yeah, I'm saying all the way. He's saying that it's considered all the way like chuppah, and except for truma, let's say. The machlekes that we're basically having over here in this sugya with all these different opinions is obviously masal l'shluch habal, the Mishnah is telling us, has significance. The question is to what extent. Meaning we would only know that okay, there's kedushin and there's nisuin, and nisuin is like that's it. Now you're fully married. The Mishnah seems to be introducing something novel about masal l'shluch habal. That's already somewhat of a nisuin. The question is to what extent would that be? Would that be for everything? Or would it be for some things? And what are those some things? Some things, like Rashi made it sound like you don't have Ava yet, so we're not going to give you her earnings, we're not going to give you the rights of Afal and Dam. So he says, yeah, I mean, it's not clear what this mechanism is of Masal Shlich Habal.
I thought Rav was saying that Masira is chuppah.
It's not chuppah itself. Chuppah is also machlokes exactly what chuppah is, but chuppah is, let's say, being secluded together. Here it's masal shluchei habal. So and Ravina is saying that what does this mean from a shlokish l'ksubasa? It means if she's going to marry someone else, we consider an almana from nisuin, not from that of kedushin. Now, the Gemara concludes, they both say, the giving over to the husband's agents is for everything. After truma, the holy gravasi, that's like you're saying, like chuppah, like totally, it's in ganzen a mesira. The Gemara asks from the following brisa. Brisa says, if let's say the father goes with the agents of the husband, or the agents of the father go with the agents of the husband. So it's not really ibigegeben. It's not really giving over because you're still there. But now that we already said these cases, but the Brisa adds on other cases too. Let's say she had a courtyard on the journey, somewhere along the path. And she went with him, meaning with her husband, Lolin, to spend the night, like any staying over the night on the road, not for the purposes of marriage. So then, although her ksuba, which are the movable items that her father designated for her in the dunya, for her dowry, are beveis bala, already shipped them already in her husband's household. If she dies, avia yarusha, her father inherits her because she never yet left her father's domain. Now, masrav l'shluchei habal, but let's say the father already gave her over to the agents of the husband. Or the father's agent gave her over to the agents of the husband. Or he had a courtyard somewhere along the journey, not her, he had. And she went with him for the purposes of marriage, not just to spend the night, like we have the yichud room, it's for the purposes of being secluded for that purpose. And even if her ksuba is still in her father's household, so the chiddush is the other way, Mesa, if she dies, Bali Yarsha, the husband inherits her. Now, Says the Brisa of Med. Remember, when we say that giving her over to the agents is considered nisuin, is considered marriage, that's lirushasa. That's to inherit her. For that purposes alone is what is considered as nisuin. Avla truma, truma. Ein isha echeles b'truma asher dekana l'chuppah. The woman does not eat truma until she actually enters into the chuppah. So says the Gemara, tiyufta de kulu, tiyufta. All those who disagree with Shmuel, which Rashi seem to be different than how you read this tiyufta. It says not for everyone. Rashi makes it sound like it's for everyone. Depends how you read it. But the point is, all those who disagree with Shmuel says that this that you are considering this as Mesira L'chuppah is only for the purposes of Yerusha. All these other opinions who held that it's, let's say, for eating Truma or for whatever other halachas that they said, then the Bryce does not like them because the Bryce says it's only L'Yerushasa. So that's refuted. It's only considered as a Mesira for the purposes of Yerusha. But the Gemara has a difficulty. Once we brought in the Bryce, the Gemara has a difficulty in how to read the Bryce. Haguva kasha. We have an internal contradiction. Because Amr, on the first hand, you say like this. You say, let's say they're going on the journey. And it's the woman and the man. Nothing to do masal l'shluch habas. The woman and the man, they're going. But they never had chuppah, they never had yichud room. But let's say they go to spend the night in a motel. In Har Chatzah. So we said she's still in the father's domain. Now, the reason is time of dalalah. The reason is because they're going to spend the night. Hastama, but let's say they entered and they waited over there without specifying. Then we say, if it's not just to spend the night, meaning just to get, rest up, there must be l'shem nisuin. Must be then for purposes of marriage, and that is the knis of chuppah, even though there was no bia, that would be considered nisuin. Problem is, they may say, but look at the next case, when the seif of the Mishnah, there was talking about cases that it would be considered as nisuin. Let's say we said Masr ha'ab l'shluch ha'bal. So nichnas yimol l'shem nisuin. Let's say she entered with him into his courtyard for the purposes of nisuin. Then we said now she's already in her husband's domain. Hastama. Let's say they didn't specify. Sounds like Lola would be to spend the night. So what's the halacha by stama? When you don't specify, when they didn't say we're doing it to spend the night, and we didn't do doing it to get married, what would that seems to be contradictory inferences? So Rav Ashi says you're right. Stami kadani. They are different halachas of stama. In other words, this that we said that if she goes in with him to spend the night, it's not that she specified I'm going in to spend the night and not for the purposes of marriage. And this that we said in the Sefer that she going in with him to get married is not that she said I'm doing it to get married. Rather, both the Reish and the Sefer are talking about when you didn't specify. So what does that mean? So which one is it? That's what the Tana was saying. Stam chatzar lida. The Reish was talking about her courtyard. When it's her chatzar, generally when you're going to enter in, you're not doing it for the purposes of marriage. That's Lolan, that's to spend the night. Because he takes her to his house, not to her apartment. If it's in her chatzar, then we're just doing it for the spend the night. But stam chatzar lidei, but generally we could, the unspecific of his chatzar, where it's his courtyard, we can presume that the entry is linisuin for the purposes of marriage. So it's not like that it was linisuin or lulin, and then we have contradicting inferences, what's halacha by stama? No, they're both cases of stama. Meaning when you didn't say anything. When you didn't say anything, by her would be to spend the night, but by his courtyard would be for the purposes of, okay, you're coming to my house, and that's for the purpose of marriage. I'll tell you in the Brisa, Masr av l'shluchei habal. If the father gave over his daughter to the agents of the husband, v'zinse, and she is mezana, so the punishment is going to be strangulation like a regular married woman, meaning not skila like a narusa, which just gets into discussion, which, especially according to those opinions, that Masa Av L'Shluch Habal is not considered entirely. So the Gemara says, no, where do we know this from? That we're not going to treat her like a Nara Hamarasa, which you get skila, and not just chenek. Chenek is a lesser severity than that of skila. So it says, you have to read the pasuk. Pasuk says, in Devarim, it says that she's going to die because she did a navala in the Jewish people, liznais beis avia, to have an immoral relationship by her father's household. So that's when you get skila. Oh, says Prat, that excludes l'shamasa av l'shluch haba. When the father gave her over to the agents of the husband, so then she's not in Beis Avi anymore. She's already on the journey. Listen, you don't have the halacha of the skulua, you should have the halacha of that of chen. Problem is, the Gemara has a question. Maybe say, Prat, maybe it's only excluding shenichnas l'chuppah v'lo nivala. That she had chuppah already, just no bia. Meaning, as Rashi explains, it's enough if you're going to exclude such a case that you're not going to say when it says nara besula that you get skila by a virgin that's a naira. This girl's still a virgin, so you're going to exclude the case of when she had chuppah just in her bia. But such a case that she didn't even have chuppah, maybe the pasuk's not excluding that case. Maybe that's still considered Beis Avia. How do you know to go so far to exclude even the case from skila, even if it's just nichnas l'shus abal, meaning that muscle l'shluch abal, and you didn't even have chuppah? So Rabbi says, no, Ami said to me, chuppah, if you had chuppah, even without bia, that behedik siva, that we explicitly have a pasuk already that there's no skila. And if I'm going to have a miyut, it must be telling me the next step of mesira l'shluch haba. Why? Where do we find that you already know to exclude the case of chuppah? Because the pasuk says over the kiyah naira besula meirasel ish. If it's going to be a naira, a girl that's pubescent, besula, a virgin, marasa, that's engaged l'ishtameh. So explain all these three terminologies. Naira is v'lo begeres. It has to be that she's pubescent and not that she's already an adult. Besula, the virgin, is v'lo beula, not that she already had bia. Marasa, engaged, is v'lo nesua, not married. Now the question is, my nesua, what does it mean that she's married that's being excluded? If you say married means literally meaning that she had chuppah, she had bia already, that's the case of excluding a ba'ula. So I already know it can't be a ba'ula. Allah must be she had chuppah and not nivala. That's the case of nesua. So I already know arusa b'lei nesua. That the halacha only applies by naira marasa, not nesua. Therefore, I'm having a different exclusionary terminology of Lizno's Beis Avia, must be excluding the case after that, which would be even the chiddush of Masl Shluchei Abal, that even that case is going to be considered excluded from the halacha. And that's how I knew to say that there, Harizu B'chenek, if she was Mizana, and not with skill. I think it's the only time.